Don't try to teach your kids all of the things we're talking about today, because it won't work until you know them yourselves, until you are living them yourselves. Welcome to the Connect Method Parenting Podcast, where correction is out, connection is in, and your kids want to listen to you. I'm Andy Martineau, creator of Connect Method Parenting, here to help you stay calm, confident, and connected no matter what. Welcome back, everybody. I'm so excited to be here with you. I love these conversations that we have on the regular. I'm especially excited about what we're talking about today because we're tackling a concept that I call encountering futility. Yes, that word you probably haven't ever uttered in a normal conversation. Maybe you wrote about it or talked about it in a sophomore philosophy class when you were trying to maybe impress your teacher, get a good grade, impress that cute person on the back row. It certainly wasn't a word that I was using frequently before I heard Dr. Neufeld explain it to me. And it profoundly shifted some things inside of me, some things in the way I parented, understood emotions. And over the last maybe month, it has come up over and over and over again in my work inside of League. And I thought I need to have a conversation about this on the podcast so that we're introducing this concept. So when you all come in and work with me in League, you'll have this basic concept. And for those who are already in League, keep listening because you already have a foundational understanding of this. If you've done mastery with me, we don't talk about this in Pivot, but we do talk about it in mastery. So if you've done mastery with me, you have an understanding that will allow you to listen and understand what I'm talking about a little bit differently than if this is a brand new concept for you. Because for a lot of us, this word futility, first, it's unfamiliar. We know what it is, but it's not a word we're using a lot. I remember when I was talking about this in my group a couple of years ago, a mom said, "Andy, this word feels so awful and depressing. I just have so many negative associations with it," which is why we have to talk about it today, because encountering futility is one of the greatest things we can do for ourselves and for our kids. I'm going to explain why, but I truly believe that because there is something that happens when we encounter futility and we do it intentionally that allows us to grow up emotionally. And that's what really, really, really matters. So we've got to first, before we dive into why you want to do it and how you do it, let's first define futility, because I want us to have the words around it. If we don't have the words to describe something, it's really hard to have the understanding. So in order for me to give you a very succinct definition, I went to ChatGPT, which is so weird that we're using ChatGPT so much now. I don't know if you're using it, but I use it more than Google, it seems like. And so that was my go-to place. I said, define futility. And it came back with this. It's a noun that refers to the quality or state of being futile. Now you might think, well, that wasn't very helpful, but let's keep going. Meaning ineffective, useless, or incapable of producing a desired result. It describes a situation, action, or effort that is pointless or has no meaningful outcome. In my words, it's when we're up against a situation where we are figuratively banging our head against the wall that's not working for us, that we can't do anything about. And the imagery that comes up for me when I'm thinking about futility is that toddler who's throwing themselves on the ground, flailing around because they didn't get the cookie, or the teenager who is so upset that you have the audacity to set a curfew or a phone restriction, and they are just irate at you. And it's that futility of, I'm not willing to change the rule because I feel like it serves you. That's the parent taking that stance, and the teenager not liking it and fighting against something that the parent is unwilling to let go of. They're holding strong. Or the tween who didn't make the team or didn't get invited to the party, and the disappointment of being up against something that you cannot change, that you have no control over. You can't go change the coach's mind once they've made the decision. I mean, you could try, but that is a situation where typically they've made their decision, or the person just didn't invite you to their birthday party. The mother decided not to give their child a cookie, or the parents have decided that these boundaries with curfew and the phone are the smartest thing that they can do out of service to their child to hold this limit is what needs to happen. And so someone is up against something they cannot change. So feeling this sense of futility after realizing that no matter how much effort we put into something, we cannot change the outcome. Or arguing with someone who is not going to change their mind or is not listening. As parents, sometimes we feel this with our kids or with another adult or with our boss, that we are trying to make a point and the other person is not listening. And then ask ChatGPT where the word came from, because I think etymology is so fascinating. It often informs us so much about the word in ways that I think are profound and increases my understanding of what that word means. And I hadn't done this with futility until I was preparing to talk to you all about it. And I loved what it came up with. I loved what it showed me. So the word futility comes from Latin and it originates. I don't speak Latin. So if you're a Latin speaker, and I guess Latin is not technically a spoken language anymore. So who knows exactly how this is supposed to say or supposed to be pronounced rather, but I'm going to give it my go. And it's probably wrong. So it originates in Latin from the word futilis, F-U-T-I-L-I-S, which means leaky, vain, or useless. Isn't that so good? That's exactly what we're talking about. Another thing it said is it means to pour, which reinforces this idea of something being ineffective, like a vessel that can't hold water, which I love, love, love that, because we are going up against something that we cannot change. And we are having this encounter with futility. And we're going to get into this more, but to maximize that experience for our growth and our learning, the sadness and the tears, so this leaky vessel that can't hold anything, like us not being able to hold our we can't hold the frustration anymore. And so we release it in the form of tears, which creates change. And we'll get into that. I know I'm skipping ahead, but I just loved what I found in this research, because when we are up against something that we cannot hold, when we have this fight against that's vain, that's useless, the best resolution is that we find our sadness, our disappointment. We have a little grief about it. We have real tears or figurative tears of sadness, a softening that then creates an emotional shift inside of us. So I loved all of that I found. I just think it's so helpful to have meaning around the concept we're talking about always, but especially today, because futility is not a word that we have a lot of, practice around using. So that concludes our little etymology lesson today. I know you weren't expecting that, but maybe I should do that more. I like it. The more awareness we have around something, the better we are able to understand it. And I want us to be able to understand the beauty of futility and not see it as a depressing negative word, because my goal for all of us is to use futility more, not less. So we've got to learn what it is so that it's not scary, so that it's not a negative thing. So futility. Now we've defined it. We've explored the etymology of it. We're introducing it as this thing that we all face on the daily. And let's share some of those experiences. What are the experiences that we face futility daily? The situations that we cannot change. And here's just a few examples. Weather. We can't change the weather as much as we might try. Sickness. Our child's emotional state. Divorce. Dinner burning. Death. Moving. Our friend moving. Being not invited to something. We face futility all of the time. Every single time that we are up against something we cannot change, we face the reality that there is something bigger than us, stronger than us, that's outside of our control, and we have to face it. Well, I shouldn't say we have to face it. We get to face it, or we get to fight it. A lot of us stay stuck in fighting it. That's why there's road rage. That's why we get stuck in cycles of blaming other people or of getting upset at the weather all day long and not letting it go, because we get stuck fighting it instead of facing futility, feeling the futility, letting it change us. Every time we have an encounter with futility, it provides an opportunity, if we use it, to productively change us. And what do I mean by that? It's not a hunch. It's science. It's been proven by the brain scans showing that every time we go up against something that we cannot change, if we allow ourselves to feel sadness, if we go from, and this is Dr. Neufeld's phrase, I love it, if we go from mad to sad, you could also use the words, resisting the situation to surrendering to the situation, fighting against the situation to allowing and accepting that this is reality. When we allow ourselves to take this trip, our brains change. We become a more emotionally mature person. So it starts hopefully when we're young and we aren't invited to that birthday party and we're devastated. And if we can allow ourselves to have this encounter with futility, we feel the emotions. That's what I'm talking about. We are up against something we cannot change. It's futile to fight against it. There is nothing that we can do to alter the situation. And instead of continuing to bang our head against a wall, which is the definition of insanity, trying to do the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, instead of that, we surrendered to the reality of our situation. I didn't get invited to the birthday party. I'm so sad. It might start mad, might start upset, but I'm so sad eventually about it. I cry. I allow myself to feel the emotions. I have that encounter with futility. We let them pass through. And what happens is that without even knowing consciously that this is going on, our nervous system registers this event from mad to sad. It realizes that this was a safe event. It happened and nobody died. It gets more comfortable with that emotional experience of disappointment, of not being invited to something, of logging something as rejection perhaps, and it grows in its capacity to handle it. So just like riding a bike, every time you ride a bike, you get better and more comfortable. And the more comfortable you get at it, the better you get at it. So the more comfortable you get at riding this wave, of feeling the emotion of disappointment, your emotional capacity grows. It's this crazy, amazing thing that happens without us doing anything consciously other than allowing us to feel our emotions. So the only conscious part of it is allowing ourselves to let all of the emotions that come up around that experience come up, to stop fighting them, to stop resisting or avoiding or reacting to the emotions, and instead feel the emotions. That's the conscious part. We're giving ourselves permission, or if we are acting in the role of a parent, we're allowing our child to have a safe space. We're doing our very best to be the midwife to their emotions being birthed out, to being let go. And every time we do this, there's a little uptick in our emotional maturity. So for us, if we burn dinner, we are given the opportunity to have an encounter with futility and use it for our benefit. For our kids, when we say they can't have a cookie, that's a micro opportunity for them to encounter futility. And if our nervous system can be neutral about this little encounter they're having with futility, which looks like a complete meltdown on the floor, if we can be okay with it and realize this is what needs to happen. They need to go from mad to sad. They need to release some of these emotions. This is the best thing that they can be doing right now for themselves. And we give them the space. We hold this safe space for them to have this emotional experience. Then that encounter with futility is used productively. We don't have to use every experience of things not working for us to the max. We don't have to. Just the times that we're able to is plenty. But knowing that that's what's happening will change everything. And I want to clarify something really quick. So many people call emotional resiliency or emotional capacity a skill. And it's not really a skill in the way we think of a skill traditionally. There is some skill involved. The skill of learning how to allow emotions, how to be present with yourself, how not to judge yourself. From the role of a parent, how to allow our kids to have that emotional experience, how to not judge them for their big emotions that are coming out, which are sometimes very negative, very hard. We've been conditioned that's not okay. We want to shut it down. Learning to not make their emotions a problem for us, that we can stay sound and calm and regulated and help facilitate their experience with futility. So we're either doing it for ourselves or doing it for our kids. And I will say it's going to be really hard to do it for your kids if you don't do it for yourself first. You've got to start with you. So this skill of consciously allowing ourselves to feel our emotions instead of react, resist, or avoid is the conscious part. But the actual brain development that happens as a result of us allowing ourselves to feel our emotions is spontaneous. That's not a skill we develop. It's the natural result of going from mad to sad, the natural result of feeling our emotions instead of reacting to them by yelling, resisting them by trying to stay busy, trying to, use willpower to not feel this emotion, try to think a happy thought, or avoid by eating or watching a movie or something. we aren't doing that. We're instead letting ourselves feel the emotions, which for so many of us is a fairly new skill. So that's the skill. But the actual emotional maturity happens spontaneously. So once we feel our emotions and we go from mad to sad, whether it's a micro experience or a macro experience, once we do that, and I'm not saying it happens in one fell swoop or it happens in one sitting. Sometimes it's over the course of days, weeks, years. But what I want to bring out is that it doesn't matter, because every time, even if it's a little partial trip, doesn't get us all the way to the finish line of resolving all of the emotions around this thing we can't change. But we have a little relief, a little sadness around it. The emotional growth happens. The nervous system does its thing. So emotional maturity happens when we have an encounter with futility. We allow ourselves to drop into the frustration instead of react or avoid the frustration. And then the emotional maturity, or you could call it capacity or resilience, happens when our nervous system has had an opportunity to feel that. It's encountered futility and it's been able to process and allow the emotions and experience them in a productive way. The growth happens much like the growth spurt we had when we were a teenager and seemed to have grown an inch overnight. It's not something that was consciously created. It happened spontaneous. And yes, there are conditions that help the growth happen. Being fed is important. If you're malnourished, you're not going to grow to your full capacity. If you're not getting good sleep, it's going to impact your physical growth. And so there are things that we're consciously creating to help our teenagers physically grow. But the growth itself isn't something that anyone is needing to be mindful of or needing to think about for it to happen. It happens spontaneous. In a similar way, emotional growth happens much like physical growth, in the fact that both happen without us needing to think about us growing an inch or think about us getting more emotionally mature. The difference is that physical growth is spontaneous and inevitable, meaning even if we wanted to stop our kids from getting older, from growing taller, we can't. It happens. It's spontaneous. It's inevitable. Every year, they're getting taller and they're getting older. But emotional growth, it has the same through line as physical growth as far as the spontaneous part. It happens spontaneously, but it's not inevitable like physical growth in the same way. Because physical growth, with the exception of extreme conditions, extreme malnutrition that will impact physical growth, for most of us, physical growth happens and it's consistent, it's inevitable, it's spontaneous. But emotional growth, it's spontaneous. It has that same element of being done inside of the body without a conscious element. It's happening in our nervous system. It's happening in our limbic system. Something is changing in our brain. And it's not because I was thinking about how I need to grow emotionally. I need to really do this thing to grow emotionally. It's happening because the environment is right. So emotional growth happens spontaneously, meaning if we go through an encounter with futility, if we go from mad to sad, if we feel our emotions all the way through, emotional maturity is the natural fruit of that. But if we aren't safe to feel our emotions, if we don't realize that it's important to feel them all the way through, if we're finding ourselves getting stuck in frustration, banging our head against the wall about things that don't work, and we're just looping around those events and upset that this person or this thing disappointed us or it's not working out, we got fired from this job and we're just fixating on it, that person doesn't like me and I can't let it go, then emotional maturity doesn't happen because we're not completing the trip from mad to sad. So that's the conscious element, is creating the environment for emotional growth. And it's much more sensitive. It's much more demanding than the environment that's needed for physical growth, because physical growth feels like it happens almost without exception, barring the very extreme circumstances. It just happens. But emotional growth, it needs to have a well cared for and tended environment. So as parents, I like to think of us as gardeners, creating this environment where the different plants can grow and can become who they are, whatever kind of plant they are. That's already baked inside of them. The gardener doesn't actually make the plants grow. The gardener creates the environment that the plants can grow, because the growth itself is spontaneous when the conditions are conducive. I want to bring this up because I hear all of the time that we've got to teach our kids to have emotional resiliency and how to regulate, teach them to breathe and relax and calm down. Yes, it's helpful to have tools to know how to face our big emotions in the moment. I won't say that those aren't important, but I do want to bring up the point that emotional resiliency isn't a result of some tactic we learn to breathe deep or to relax. It's something that unfolds inside of us because we've allowed ourselves to experience the emotional waves that we're going through. It's the fruit of that experience of feeling our emotions, of letting something that we cannot change us. So emotional growth is spontaneous when the conditions are conducive. And one of the conditions necessary to emotional maturity is the condition that allows our kids to have safe encounters with futility in a supported way so that their nervous systems can log situations that are disappointing, frustrating, upsetting as safe versus unsafe, that they can complete the cycle, feel the emotions, go from mad to sad, as the amazing Dr. Neufeld calls it, or resistance to surrender, and become a different person. So that sets the foundation for what futility is and why we want some. Because even though we can't force emotional growth to happen, we can create the conditions that are needed to cultivate emotional maturity. And we might want to work on creating them for ourselves first and foremost so that then we can create them for our children. So let's recap. Let's recap what we're talking about so far. Emotional maturity is spontaneous if the conditions are conducive but not inevitable. So unlike physical maturity that is spontaneous and inevitable, so we all get older, but we don't all grow up, right? So physical maturity, we all get older. That's spontaneous and inevitable, but we don't all grow up, meaning we do not all gain the emotional maturity that matches our age. And that's because we have more emotions, but less feeling, meaning we're avoiding, resisting, reacting to emotions that are in our body instead of feeling them, allowing them, and processing them. And this is completely normal. We're going to have areas in our life where we are more emotionally mature because of experiences as that we've had, emotional trips that we've gone from mad to sad there. We felt our sadness. We've, stopped banging our head against the wall. And then we're going to have other areas of our life that are more underdeveloped, simply because we either haven't allowed ourselves to feel the sadness, feel the futility, and allow it to be, or we don't have as much experience there. I mean, we haven't had as many opportunities to figuratively get on the bike and try to ride it. And so this makes sense. So if you're looking at your life and you're thinking, oh, I'm much more emotionally mature in this area of my life, maybe work, you're really solid and you feel really great about how you show up there. But then you think about being a parent and you realize that your kids trigger you constantly and that you're not as emotionally mature as you'd like to be. You can't stay regulated when they start throwing a fit. And that's typical. It's very normal for us to get more triggered at home. There's a lot of reasons for that. But knowing that that is the case allows us to start to do something about it. If we want to start showing up as the mom or the dad who doesn't get triggered when the house is upset or the kids are fighting, then we need to go through this encounter with futility. We need to feel the emotions, surrender to the situation, drop the fight or flight reaction, which then lets our brain perceive the safety around the situation and our emotional capacity increases. We take that trip from mad to sad, resistance to surrender, then we get emotional growth. And I do want to clarify that when I say sad, it's figurative. So it's a state of surrender, a state of softening versus actual tears. It can have actual tears, and toddlers show those tears and cry those tears, loud and proud. But as teenagers, as adults, sometimes we don't cry the tears, but we feel the sadness, we feel the surrender, we feel the softening. So when I say sad, I mean we've just dropped the resistance and we've surrendered to reality. We've stopped fighting it. Our walls of defensiveness are down, and we will feel a shift. You will feel a shift in your nervous system go from sympathetic to parasympathetic, from fighting to calm, back to homeostasis. So whether you cry or not, it doesn't matter. I do want to mention, as we're on the topic of tears, that there's been some fantastic research done on tears. The composition of tears varies depending on the emotional context, which I think is incredible. And they have found, this is from the American Journal of Ophthalmology, they found that emotional tears contain higher concentrations of stress hormones. And this, you all, suggests that emotional tears play a role in reducing stress and pain, which, again, amazing. Additionally, research highlighted in clinical autonomic research indicates that emotional crying is associated with distinct neurobiological processes, including autonomic nervous system actions, which is exactly what we're talking about. The nervous system is doing its thing, and as a result, there's different types of tears. This all shows that emotional states influence tear composition. So in summary, emotional tears differ chemically from other types of tears, meaning the tears that a toddler is crying when they're upset and they're angry and they're on the floor and they're throwing their fit, those tears have a different chemical composition than the tears when they get to their sadness. And the tears that they cry when they get to that sad surrender state, they've given up the fight, the stress hormones are in those tears. The fight or flight hormones are coming out in the tears they're crying when they're sad, which are different chemicals that are in the tears than the ones that they were finding when they were crying out of anger, which I think is fantastic. We literally cry out the chemicals that we no longer need as we surrender to the experience. I love that there's this physical element, this measurable element to it that is easier to wrap our brains around than what the nervous system is doing behind the doors. So feeling our emotions matter because it's the only way to increase our emotional capacity is to feel the emotions. So the root of a lot of problems we're facing as humans is that we have more emotions, but less feeling. We're not feeling our emotions. We're avoiding, meaning we're buffering, we're watching TV, we're eating food, we're staying busy, or we're resisting. We're thinking happy thoughts. We're trying to use willpower to stop the negative emotions from coming, or we're reacting. That could look like road rage, yelling, blaming. And whether we're resisting, we're avoiding, or we're reacting, when we do those things, the emotions stay stuck and feel more powerful. Because the more you resist an emotion, the more powerful it becomes, meaning the more power it has over you. I call it a takeover. It starts taking over and creates long-term distress. Versus when we feel our emotions, especially around things we can't change, the opposite happens. They resolve, they move through us. We feel more empowered. We find safety in our emotions. We're willing to take more risks. We show up in life more boldly. We're willing to pursue goals despite all the discomfort that we might associate it with that negative emotion. And also when you're feeling your emotions, you can access deeper awareness. So you're able to understand yourself better. What's causing this? Why am I so afraid of this thing? You recognize thoughts and allow for yourself to change. When you're feeling them, you get the wisdom and the understanding from the experience instead of just more frustration. You're not pouring fuel on the fire. You're letting it die down. Here's the truth. Emotional transformation happens when we process and release emotions, not when we suppress them. So with that in mind, it's important to know how to properly feel an emotion, because if feeling our emotions is so important, taking that trip from mad to sad, then we need to know how to ride that train, because we want that spontaneous emotional maturity that's created when we do that. And even though we can't increase our emotional maturity overnight by just willpower and thinking and trying to get it right any more than we can convince a tomato plant to grow a foot overnight, we can use our amazing brain to increase our chance for emotional growth, just like we can increase the tomato plant's chance for physical growth by tending to the garden better, making sure it's getting all of the things that it needs in its environment to grow. So how do we use our cognition to increase our chances that we're going to have more emotional maturity? That's the question, right? That's the big question, is if this is all happening spontaneous in the background, then what can I do? And again, feel our emotions, but how do we set ourselves up to feel the emotions? Well, we can use cognition to increase our emotional awareness. And how do we do this? We learn the skill of creating an environment where emotional maturity can take place. Again, just like the gardener, we have to learn how much water, sunlight, fertilizer is needed for the tomato plant. We have to learn how much support, what kind of support, what things help bring in the emotional experience for ourselves and our kids. So let's talk about how we can do that, how we can create this environment, how we can use our prefrontal cortex, the thinking part of our brain, to help increase our chances to feel our emotions. And again, it always starts with us. Don't try to teach your kids all of the things we're talking about today, because it won't work until you know them yourselves, until you are living them yourselves. So practice on yourself first, and then they will learn just by who you are being. You won't have to teach them, because you'll have become the person who does the things. So when your child needs help feeling their emotion, you won't have to teach them as much as you will be guiding them with your inner wisdom and knowing. So how do we get to that place where, because of who we are being, we're able to help our child feel their emotions? Well, I'm going to give you some steps because this was really helpful for me. I found myself in a very emotionally underdeveloped place when I became a parent, and I thought I was really emotionally sound, and I was in other areas of my life, but I needed to start translating that to parenting and grow in my capacity because I was fairly young when I started. So I had some growth opportunities that my kids were helping me have. So we need to increase our own emotional capacity. And how we do that is acknowledge the emotion, naming the emotion. Oh, this is frustration. This is anxiety. This is doubt. This is rejection. I have frustration. Labeling an emotion makes it tangible and manageable. That's very helpful. So if it feels as though your ability to acknowledge the emotions, to name the emotions is limited, you don't have a lot of words, or you have the same 3 to 5 emotional labels for every experience you're having, think about expanding your emotional vocabulary. You can go online, you can type in emotion wheel. There's hundreds of them on the internet. Find one that works for you and look at all the different ways they label emotions and how they allow an emotion and how they show different variations of different emotions. It's really interesting. So first, we've got to acknowledge the emotion. We've got to name it. Second, start trying to describe how this emotion feels in your body. Does it feel like a buzz in your solar plexus? Does it feel like a slight clench in your stomach? Do you feel your shoulders tightening up? That's where I feel mine. Do you feel heat? For me, shame is heat in the face, tingling, throat clenching. So practice awareness of the bodily sensations that are associated with the emotions you're feeling, and remove your resistance to how you're feeling them in your body. Welcome them in, become friends with them, and realize this is the way your nervous system is communicating with you. Finally, accept the emotions instead of avoiding them. So when you feel the negative emotions start bubbling up, see if you can allow it to be there instead of push it away. Feeling our emotions fully is going to help us manage, feel, process them better. It's going to be really hard to feel our emotions if we're trying not to feel that emotion. So that's how to use cognition, or our thinking brain, to create more awareness. And having that awareness, you all, is important. It's important to creating an environment where we can feel our emotions all the way through, where we can take that trip from mad to sad. So that's the first way. If you're struggling with where to start with your emotional journey of how to get better at feeling your emotions, welcoming them in, I really recommend you go through those steps. You're going to acknowledge them. So you're going to name them. You're going to describe how they feel in your body. And then you're going to try to accept the emotion instead of avoiding them. So it's one way we can use our brain to create that environment, or if we use the gardener analogy, to create that garden that cultivates growth. The second way we can use cognition to facilitate emotional growth is by allowing ourselves to feel. So you help yourself feel mad to sad. You have this encounter with futility. How do we do this? Well, you've got to start by accepting that life is 50-50. Once you aren't worried about emotions, feeling any emotion, all emotions, you're going to be ready for phase 2 of encountering futility, which I call allowing. So at this point in the emotional journey, we begin to use our cognition, or our thinking brain, to intentionally allow ourselves to feel our emotions. And this could be happening naturally when an upsetting, troubling event comes up, or we can schedule a time to encounter futility, to feel our emotions around something that is troubling to us, ongoing, or we just feel stuck emotions. We don't even have a reason why we might feel stuck emotions. We're just feeling angsty. We're feeling agitated. We're feeling frustrated. So we schedule in time to encounter our futility, to feel our emotions so we can get them moving. So it's less about acknowledging the emotions, describing them, accepting them, although all those are very important things and are still happening. But sometimes it's really just about using our mind to say, wow, I feel something really big coming up, and saying, hey, nervous system, it's safe to feel, and I'm going to let myself feel this. So I have a couple of examples of encounters with futility. The first one's a personal one. It happened about a month ago. It was spontaneous based on some events that unfolded that day. I ended up writing a poem in my processing of the experience after I completed my trip from mad to sad, and I'll share that. So let me explain what happened. I shared this with some of the parents inside of League, and they found it very helpful. I got lots of of responses and replies to me sharing this. So I wanted to share it today since we're talking about futility, because I think it's really powerful to see it in action. So here's the setup. I have a son who's currently living in Chile, who has recently had some really hard things happen. So hard and so heartbreaking for me that I wanted to jump on a plane and go scoop this adult. He's totally an adult. He's 20, 21. I wanted to scoop him up and bring him home. But, he was down there having his experience, and these hard things that he was going through were something he was choosing to do. And this had been happening for a year and a half at this point. He'd been struggling, but it was an ongoing struggle that he was having, and he was choosing to stay. And I was sad and happy and all of the things because he was growing so much, but also it was just so hard to watch him struggle from afar, and I couldn't go do anything or touch him or give him a hug or anything. So we had this call scheduled because he could only talk on certain days because of what he's doing. He's really busy. And so we had this time scheduled. Well, we were in New Zealand at the time, and the time difference was crazy. He was 8 hours ahead of us, and the window of time where he had the ability to call was very narrow, and we had to change Airbnbs that day. So we had 3 hours of driving and not great cell service. And I think I had my notifications off. So I missed the call. I didn't get to talk to him. And you might be thinking, well, why is this a big deal? Because we couldn't talk again. Our next scheduled call wasn't for another week. So we get to the Airbnb, it's 3:00, and it hits me that it's 11 o'clock his time. I completely lost track of time. My husband and I had been chatting on the trip a lot on the drive about a bunch of stuff. I'd gotten lost in our conversation, forgot about what time it was. I was just thinking, oh, we'll call when we get there, because it's so weird to have just such a huge time difference. And so we get to the Airbnb, it hits me, it's 11. I open up my phone, I see that he had tried to call, and I lost it. I lost it. And I'm going to get emotional talking about it. And I'm going to read the poem and move to this. It's not a great poem. It's not going to get any type of award, but I think it succinctly talks about the futility that I went through. So I'll just start with the poem, I don't even know if I keep calling it a poem. I don't even really know it's a poem. It's just the way I processed it. It's how I wrote it down after I cried on the couch for 3 hours. So, okay, here it goes. We moved houses today. We're still in New Zealand. We had a 3-hour drive and I missed a call. Not just any call, a call from Cooper. He's living in Chile and he has a lot going on. It'd been a week since we talked and I needed to talk to him. I had messaged him first thing in the morning to make sure I didn't miss his call. And now I'd missed his call. Last week he was struggling, the kind of struggling that makes you want to jump on a flight and rescue him from what he's facing, even though I know that's not my job. 7 days I'd waited to talk to him. By the time I realized I'd missed his call, I knew he'd be asleep. He's 8 hours ahead. I was devastated, really devastated. I messaged him anyway. No response. And then it hit me. I wouldn't get to talk to him for another week, 7 more days. He would only be able to talk to me again in 7 more days. It didn't seem fair. I felt the tears, big tears. Part of me wanted to go numb, to tell myself, it's fine. You're overreacting. But it wasn't fine. It wasn't even a little fine. I needed to talk to him. I had to talk to him. I wanted to fix this. I wanted to rewind time, to turn the ringer on my phone up. Why didn't I think of checking? I'd gotten lost in a great conversation with Scott and lost track of time, and now there was nothing I could do. I was up against a situation I couldn't fix. I thought about the traffic circle of big emotions. Exit 1, not an option. I couldn't change this. I was so mad that I couldn't change this. Exit 2. My nervous system was aching to go there, to feel the sadness, but I wasn't sure. Did I really want to feel this? Did I want to surrender this? Oh, my heart, part of me didn't want to go there. Exit 3, I felt a ping of attacking energy coming up towards myself. I wanted to attack myself for not realizing my phone was on Do Not Disturb. I wanted to attack my husband for not making sure his volume was up so that we could hear when Cooper called. The desire to attack and stay frustrated didn't last long. It would have stuck around for hours or days years ago. It lingered for a minute, maybe 2. I found my way back to exit 2. I crawled there. I was beat. I let the mad go. I surrendered to the tears, trusting that falling face first into the futility of the situation would be the healing balm my soul was craving. Trusting that surrendering didn't mean I was weak, but meant I was strong. Trusting that my body knew what it was doing, that my nervous system was wise, that allowing myself to feel the emotions would create the emotional resilience, growth, and maturity I needed and wanted. Trusting that I would go from mad to sad, and that sweet release, relief, and growth would follow. 45 minutes, maybe more, hours. I don't know how long I cried. I really cried, consciously cried. I allowed myself the full expression. I allowed the full expression to come out, not because it made logical sense. It made no logical sense. I was being completely irrational. It was just one missed call. Yet it was everything in that moment. It made emotional sense. My nervous system was begging for the release. I gave in and cried more. I felt layers of sadness and frustration and disappointment. A lot had nothing to do with the missed call. My nervous system had been waiting for a moment of futility to present itself. And for me to be willing to feel it. Why? So a purge could take place. After crying, I could feel the shift. The shift from mad to sad, the shift from sad to surrender, the shift from surrender to resilience. I got off the couch, still sad, but not mad. I wasn't weighed down by the sadness. I was invigorated by it. Confidence followed. Love and compassion showed up. Something incredible and unexpected happened, like it always does. Something incredible and unexplainable happened, like it always does when I take the trip. It feels a little like magic, and in a way it is. Scientists don't really know how it works, how the limbic system does it. It's a mystery, but it happens. The process of emotional alchemy happens when the feelings go from mad to sad, then from surrender to resilience. This happens when I allow myself to be fully human, embrace the 50-50, participate in the full human experience. I change. It happens every time I feel my emotions. It happens when I allow myself to be changed by the things I cannot change. Part of me is still sad inside. I missed the call. And at the same time, part of me knows it's okay. Part of me knows that if Cooper needs me, he'll call. And that if I can do anything, I'll do it. So what I just shared with my experience of missing the phone call with Cooper is an example of encountering futility in the wild. It just happens. And if we have the luxury, the space, if we're in the right mind space to be able to encounter in that moment, we can do that. And it's beautiful and it can be very healing, very helpful. But sometimes we don't have that luxury. So we need to schedule the encounter with futility. So if I had been needing to go run errands, take kids places, I couldn't stop and cry for 45 minutes. I could have said to myself, this is something I want to return back to. I'll do it tonight. So I could schedule that encounter with futility. So that's one way that we can schedule an encounter with futility. Another reason we might want to schedule an encounter with futility is when you are feeling stuck. You can tell you're avoiding something. And you can tell this because you're on edge, you're frustrated. It doesn't feel like anybody's doing the right thing. You're not doing the right thing. And you can just tell something's not right. So the example I want to share with you is something you could go watch, which I think is really fun. So this example in a series on Apple called Shrinking is along those same lines, where we're scheduling an encounter with futility. We're scheduling a time to feel our emotions because there's unresolved emotions. And in this case, it's a big one because Jimmy, who plays the grieving therapist who's recently lost his wife, and Alice, his daughter, are going through something really, really big. And Harrison Ford, who plays his mentor, Jimmy's mentor, he's also a therapist in this series, notices that they've been bottling up their grief. And specifically, he notices that Alice has been bottling up her grief over her mother's death. And instead of forcing some deep conversation, he gives her simple but powerful advice. Harrison Ford encourages Alice to cry for 10 minutes to start processing her mother's death. And after Harrison Ford's character, Paul, encourages Alice to take 10 minutes to put on a sad song and to cry, she initially resists, but eventually she follows the advice. And it shows later in the episode that Jimmy, the dad, and Alice, the daughter, are sitting on this park bench with their headphones in, listening to music, not saying a word to each other. They're quietly allowing themselves to feel the grief, Tears are streaming down their faces as they sit side by side, processing their loss in their own way, yet together. And it's a powerful moment, a wordless moment of connection. A father and a daughter both struggling with the death of their beloved mother and wife, finally letting themselves feel their pain at the same time. The beauty of it in its simplicity is so powerful. No forced conversation, no grand gestures, just a shared, silent understanding. This scene is one of the most emotionally resonant for me because it highlights futility. It shows how simple yet powerful, how hard yet easy it is to feel our emotions. And it's a beautiful illustration of what it looks like to encounter futility, to allow yourself to take the trip from mad to sad. So whether you are consciously naming the emotion and seeing where it is in your body and accepting that all emotions are okay, or you're just turning on some music and letting yourself feel whatever emotions come up, even if you don't know where these frustrating emotions are coming from, beautiful, amazing. Or something spontaneously happens in the day and you're so upset or sad by it and you let yourself have a moment to cry. This is how emotional maturity is developed. That's what we want for ourselves, so that we can be the best parent we possibly can be for our children. And that's what we want for our children, so that they will be able to go out in the world and have a successful life. Because if the worst thing that can happen is an emotion, and we aren't afraid of emotions, and our kids aren't afraid of emotions, and we know the worst thing that can happen is to feel this emotion, and that's okay, then nothing's going to stop us. So the goal is that we're feeling more emotions, not less. So here's my challenge for everybody this week. Schedule an encounter with futility, or capitalize on a spontaneous encounter with futility that pops up in your life. And you can either do it by using your cognition to create more emotional awareness, to name it, to describe it in your body and let yourself feel it, or you can just allow yourself to feel the emotion, to open yourself up to it, and let the tears flow, whether they're figuratively or real. One of my favorite ways to do this is to turn on Rock 2. It's a piano concerto, the second piano concerto by Rachmaninoff. And the reason it always floods me with emotions is because my oldest, who's a classically trained pianist, an amazing pianist, and Cooper, who I was talking about earlier, is amazing as well. They both were classically trained. But my oldest, Jerem, he played that as a guest artist. He won this competition and played it with a professional orchestra. And there's so many emotions that come up instantly when I feel that. Because he played it 2 years or something. We heard that song so many times, and there's so many visceral memories associated with that song, from the practicing to the other kids' comments, all of us humming it along to us watching it. So if I want to bring up a bunch of emotions and I need it to happen quickly, I'll turn on Rock 2. So find something that is impactful or meaningful for you, perhaps that reminds you of something that allows you to drop into an emotional state. It can be any song. You might have a collection of songs. I have a little playlist that I can turn on, that I can listen to, that bring up a lot of emotions. And I talked about this in episode 99, Emotional Expression. So if you want to go back and listen to more of me explaining this, it's actually when we were in Rome, I had this collection of events happen that caused me to have a lot of emotions. And I talk about how I turned on a show and I used a movie to help me move through my emotions, because I could feel they were coming up and I didn't want them to get stuck. So you can listen to that if you want more examples on this. I'd forgotten I shared that until I was preparing for this episode. I'm like, oh, I shared something else. I didn't call it Encounter with Futility, but that's what it was. So pick some music, make a little playlist, find a couple of shows that bring up a lot of emotions. For me, I love The Notebook. There's also a movie called About Time, which just, it's so good. If I watch that movie, I know I'm going to cry my eyes out. It reminds me of how precious life is. We watch it multiple times every year. And I'm not one to watch a movie more than once. I usually am a one and done kind of girl. But this movie, so good. So that's your homework. Prepare for the next time you need to feel a big emotion. You need to get it through. Have your music ready. Have your movies ready so you can lean into it. And then also, if you notice this week that something happens, you have a big disappointment, a big frustration, see if you can lean into it a little bit more. You can capitalize on that encounter with futility. Got it? All right, you guys. I loved having this conversation. I know you all want to be unstoppable, and the way to be unstoppable is to be the most emotionally mature version of yourself. That's what you want for yourself. That's what you want for your kids. So that's what we're talking about today, because we want to be the most capable, calm, connected parent possible. And in order to do that, we have to be comfortable with our emotions. We have to be able to handle challenging situations in a way we respect and not get overtaken by our emotions, by our nervous system, and show up in a way we don't want to show up. So go feel some futility, go connect with your kids, and I'll talk to you guys next time. See you guys. Bye. Thanks so much for listening, you all. If you are ready to learn more about Connect Method Parenting, if you've been listening to the podcast and you think, ooh, I'd love to be able to implement this in my life and with my parenting more, then check out Pivot. It's my 8-week program where we deep dive into learning and implementing Connect Method Parenting so that you can take this information and transform your parenting journey. Head over to connectmethodparenting.com to find out when the next group starts.